This is draft season. No, wait a second. This is draft night. Draft season is presented by Moody's. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Visit Moody's.com to learn more. John Schmeelk, Tony Pauline, round one of the 2024 NFL draft is in the books. We're going to break it all down for you late night here on the East Coast. And Tony, unprecedented first 14 picks in this draft were on the offensive side of the ball. We talked about this being an offensive heavy draft for most of this cycle, but I don't think either one of us would have predicted the first 14 picks being on offense.
I mean, we thought one player from defense would go to the top 10. I think when you look at overall, I was surprised at how the pass rushers fell. I was surprised about the order of the pass rushers, although we talked about that in the last show that, there were some people who thought that Burst could be the second pass rusher taken. He could be the fourth. So that I think that the way they fell off the board was a bit surprising, the two going first. The cornerbacks coming off as late as they did, I think that was surprising. And I really think what was most surprising from what I had heard, what other people were saying, was just the lack of trades that we saw in the first round. I mean, we saw what? We didn't see any trades in the top 10. The first trade that was made was with the Jets and the Vikings. Well, I'm sorry, it was the 10th pick, the Jets and the Vikings, right? That was surprising as well.
Yeah, and in the first 12 picks, count them, Tony, half of those 12 picks were quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So let's start there, and we'll go down in order here, and we'll go through some of these quick because there's a lot of stuff that we expect and we talked about ad nauseum. So we don't need to, oh wow, the Bears took Caleb Williams. I can't believe it. So the first three picks, this was chalk as we all kind of expected. The Bears, the Commanders, the Patriots, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, back to back to back. All three teams needed quarterbacks. They picked the three quarterbacks that I think, in whatever order you had them, we all thought were the three best quarterbacks in the draft. Should surprise nobody.
No, I think you could even extend it to 5 picks because we knew that if the Arizona Cardinals weren't going to trade, they were going to take Marvin Harrison. The Los Angeles Chargers, could they trade? I kept saying all along it was going to be Joe Alt. So I think really the first 5 picks came off the board the way a lot of people thought.
Well, Tony, by the way, I'm going to extend it to 6 because I thought if May wasn't there, I thought the Giants were going to take Neighbors all along. So I think you could argue 1 through 6.
Absolutely. I guess the 7th pick with J.C. Latham making such a big move up into the top 10. I don't think too many predicted that, but Caleb Williams coming off, Jaden Daniels coming off. I think when Drake May came off 3 to the Patriots, I think that really put a damper in a lot of the trade hopes, whether it was the Minnesota Vikings, whether it was New York Giants. And then I don't think there was that much of a market for Arizona because we saw, where J.J. McCarthy fell. Arizona, they get a blue chip player. They get the best receiver in the draft. If Marvin Harrison, lives up to expectations, he's a perfect fit there. Joe Alt, I had said all along, I was hearing tackle. I knew that they liked Joe Alt. I think he's a Jim Harbaugh type of lineman. I think they're going to move him to the right side. Malik Neighbors is potentially the number 1 receiver that the Giants have needed. I just hope he keeps his focus on the football field. He's big, he's fast, he's explosive, he's dependable, he's great running after the catch. He can separate. He's got all the tools to be a big-time player. And as we know, LSU receivers are much better on Sunday than they are on Saturday. And Malik Neighbors is pretty special on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, if he somehow was better than 1,590 receiving yards and like 14 touchdowns, I think the Giants were pretty happy with that. You kind of mentioned this in your answer, Tony, and I think the lack of trades at 4 and 5 with Arizona and the Chargers. So do you think all the smoke we heard about how all these teams, McCarthy could be the 2nd pick, he'd be the 3rd pick, teams love him, they're much higher on him than draft analysts are, where, his consensus draft spot on big boards was kind of in the 20s somewhere. Do you think that was a lot of hot air when all said and done?
No, I think I think probably what happened I think Minnesota wanted Drake May. That's the number 1. I think that I was a little bit surprised that Denver maybe didn't try and make a move up to get J.J. McCarthy because I thought I was told that was the quarterback that Sean Payton wanted all along. Don't know what conversations went on in those rooms, but I'm sure that I think with Tennessee and Atlanta taking Penix at 8, those are surprising that those teams, didn't trade down because I'm sure Tennessee probably could have easily gotten J.C. Latham at 11. Don't know what was offered there. They obviously had their heart set on the player.
Yeah, and Latham ended up being the second offensive tackle off the board. And then the big surprise pick, Tony, came in number 8. We'll spend some time on this pick individually because I think both of us were pretty surprised by it. And I don't think we were the only two. Kirk Cousins might have been one as well. The Atlanta Falcons selecting Michael Penix Jr. at number 8, who's going to be 24-year-olds in May. They just signed Kirk Cousins to a 3-year contract that, while not fully guaranteed for 3 years, it's real. There's a lot of guaranteed money over 3 years. So Penix is not going to get on the field until he's 26 years old at the minimum. Just, I think, a surprising pick at 8, where the Falcons had so many needs on defense, and they just signed Kirk Cousins to this huge contract, and then they used the 8th pick on a 24-year-old rookie quarterback. It's just odd.
There was talk of this earlier in the week, and I thought it was so absurd, I just dismissed it. And people had said this to me. I was like, they just signed Kirk Cousins to a huge contract. Why would they reach for Michael Penix? We may know the answer. We may never know the answer, but it was just completely bizarre. I mean, they could have probably traded down. They need a defense. They doubled up on a position where you can't put two quarterbacks on the field at the same time. It's not like they signed a big name receiver in free agency and then they supplemented with another receiver. It's completely bizarre. And like I said, people were talking about this earlier in the week, and I just thought the notion was so absurd. It went in one ear and out the other ear. Obviously, they were right, and I was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you make the picks, Tony, because surprising things happen, and we'll see what happens now with the Falcons and when Penix can even get on the field, which will be interesting to see. Bears pick Roma Dunze at 9, pairing a top wide receiver with Caleb Williams. Really smart pick there. Vikings move up one spot. I believe it was a 4 and a 5 or a 3 and a 4 that they traded. Was 4 and a 5, right?
They don't have any day 2 picks.
That's right.
I think was one of the reasons why they struggled to get really to the top of the draft, because they didn't have any day 2 picks. So it was a 4th and a 5th. To basically move up one spot.
Basically that's stopping, I guess, Denver from moving up ahead of them, right? With the Jets is pretty much why you would make that trade.
I would assume so, because I mean, I don't know if Denver really made any calls to move up to the Jets to get get JJ McCarthy. It seemed that even though I had been told and reporting that Sean Payton liked JJ McCarthy, in recent weeks they had their heart set on Bo Nix, who they selected at 12. And then the Jets, with Brock Bowers there, they took Fasciano, which I think was a phenomenal pick. I mean, I said it on the show. One of the readers asked, are you taking a receiver? Are you taking Bowers? Are you taking an offensive tackle? And I said Fasciano. I mean, he's been my guy. I like him in some ways better than Joe Alt. I think he's a better pass protector, got better footwork. And as I put out on Twitter, there's a lot of similarities between Olu Fasciano and the player the Jets drafted 18 years ago, guy by the name of D'Brickashaw Ferguson, who was a phenomenal left tackle. I thought this was an outstanding pick by the Jets.
Yeah, look, Tyron Smith's on a 1-year deal. He's always injured, and you pick your left tackle of the future. He's going to get on the field this year. We don't know when, but he will get on the field at some point. Tyron Smith has not played more than 13 games, I don't think, in 6 or 7 seasons. So, I agree. I think that was the smart, wise decision by the Jets. And we both love Brock Bowers. There's nothing against Brock Bowers. I just think it was the right pick for them. I agree with you. And the Vikings, of course, to pick J.J. McCarthy at number 10. So they get their quarterback of the future as well, without having to trade a lot of draft capital to move up. So you wonder about that earlier trade where they got the second first-round pick this year and whether or not that was the right thing to do. They ended up trading up again from 21 to 17 to select Dallas Turner. We could talk about that, but I thought it was interesting what the Vikings ended up doing. You mentioned Bo Nix at 12 to Denver. We kind of matched him with Sean Payton a lot through this process, Tony. We thought the system was a fit. Denver decides not to get cute to try to trade down and get him a little bit later. I guess after 5 quarterbacks went, they're like, oh boy, we got the Raiders right behind us. They didn't get one of these quarterbacks, and we better not risk moving down and losing our guy here.
I guess. I mean, but Antonio Pierce and the Raiders, is Bo Nix really their type of quarterback? They like the vertical arm, and I'm sure they were disappointed when Michael Penix came off the board. I don't know that the Raiders would have taken Bo Nix. I don't know whether he fits the system. He's not a Raiders type of passer. Maybe that was the thinking with Sean Payton and taking Bo Nix. Listen, he better produce, or this we're gonna go on record and saying this. In my opinion, this is one of the biggest reaches. You took Bo Nix at least a round earlier than he decided to go, and you didn't trade down. I like the player, wish him a lot of success, but this is still very early.
Yeah, Tony, for me, of the 22 of my top 23 players on my board got picked in the first 24 picks, right?
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
feel like I ranked them pretty well. My two outliers were Nix and Penix. I mean, and that shouldn't be a surprise, right? And the two corners, Mitchell and Arnold, were the two guys that I had higher that didn't end up going in that mix. So I'm with you, and I hope both those quarterbacks end up having success. They both are good guys by all reports. We want all these guys to be successful. But the Raiders get a good value player at 13, Tony. They get Brock Bowers, who's a really good player. And then I think the Saints got a really good player in Taliesin Fuanga to complete that 14 consecutive offensive player run.
Exactly. And again, the Saints go offensive line or go on the line of scrimmage. I mean, Bowers should be a weapon there. You got Gardner Minshew, you got Aiden O'Connell. You know, they're going to have to go from a short passing game and build out from there. And you got Brock Bowers, who's now is going to be one of their lethal threat in the short and intermediate passing game. He can get downfield, but right away, he offers a reliable pair of hands. You're hoping to develop Aiden O'Connell. Worst case scenario, you got the journeyman Gardner Minshew there. Fuega, I think that New Orleans was probably thrown off when the Jets took Fashanu early on because they would have rather had the left tackle. They bring in Fuega. I think they probably wanted to consider moving Penning to the right side. You're not going to be able to do that now because Fuega is solely a right tackle, potentially very good right tackle. So they do fill a need. And Ryan Ramczyk is injured. You don't know when he's coming back. You don't know if he's coming back. So this is a solid pick by the Saints.
Absolutely agree with you. All right, and then we finally get some defensive players, Tony. We got Laiatu Latu off the board to the Indianapolis Colts. They were not able to move up and get Brock Bowers like a lot of the reports said they were trying to do. Seattle takes Byron Murphy, and then the Vikings trade up to select Dallas Turner. We have our run of defensive players.
I think it was surprising that the Colts take Latu. I thought they would go pass rusher in round 2. I thought they were going to go with an offensive weapon in round 1. Probably slightly surprising that Latu was the first pass rusher off the board, but he's a quality player. If he stays healthy, they got themselves a heck of a pick. I'd known all along in one of my earlier mock drafts, I had Byron Murphy going to Seattle. I mentioned that throughout the week. I just didn't think Byron Murphy was going to be there because there was all kinds of talk about Murphy being a top 15 pick, being a potential top 10 pick. But with all the quarterbacks coming off the board, with some surprises at offensive tackle like J.C. Latham going earlier than most people thought, Byron Murphy slid a little bit later than expected. The Vikings trade up with Jacksonville, which was sort of surprising because Jacksonville was staring at two good cornerbacks. They take Dallas Turner. I thought it was a terrific move. You said, you wondered about Minnesota trading for that second first-round pick to give them some draft capital to potentially move up and get the quarterbacks. Well, they got a quarterback, and they got an outstanding pass rusher, an outstanding defender in that Daniel Hunter mode, so they could potentially replace him. So I thought the Minnesota Vikings, I like what they did better with this pick, getting Dallas Turner, than what they did with J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah, I was kicking myself. In my final mock, Tony, I was debating between a defensive end and Byron Murphy for the Seahawks at 16. I gave him the end. They gave him Jared Verse instead. And kicking myself because it was very, very close. Verse went going 2 picks later. So now let's go to the next group. We knew the Bengals needed an offensive tackle. They pick right tackle on Marius Mims. Smart pick. Rams needed a defensive player. They take Jared Verse, the last defensive end. Makes a lot of sense. And then the Steelers, you knew they needed an offensive lineman. They took Troy Fautanu, the versatile guard tackle. We kind of got word what the injury stuff was with him, something with a Lisfranc sprain that apparently teams were a little bit nervous about. But he goes to the Steelers, and then Miami has all those injuries at edge rusher, and they end up drafting Chop Robinson. Your guy gets into the top 21.
Marius Mims, I think it's a great pick for Cincinnati. People say he's only played 8 games, and I say, well, look how he's done in those 8 games. So if you keep him healthy, you develop him. Imagine what this guy is going to be playing 17 games a year. I think it was a terrific pick. It fills a need. Jared Verse, they wanted Latu, so they go with the next best pass rusher, Jared Verse, who's explosive. He's quick. We've talked about him before. He's a natural fit for that system. I think he'll do real good. Fatano, there were also some knee issues from what I had heard earlier in the week, some significant knee issues, which raised some red flags. Obviously, the Steelers were happy with it. And I think with the Steelers, they get a guy who, is an interior guy who they may eventually move him out to the outside. It'd be interesting to see where they line him up early in his career. Chop Robinson, I knew the Dolphins wanted a pass rusher. I thought they may trade down. Actually, when Graham Barton was still there, I thought that may be the pick. But listen, as you said, I mean, I've been a big fan of Robinson's for the past 2 years. Happy to see him go this early. I think he'll do a terrific job there.
Then the Eagles get the stick and pick, Tony. They get Quinion Mitchell. I think great value at 22. They needed a corner, top corner on most boards, really good player. I think that was a really good pick for them. And then the Jaguars, even after trading down, Tony, they get to replace Calvin Ridley with Brian Thomas Jr. I think he's really good value at 23. Then Dallas gets out at 24. The Lions move up. They take Terry and Arnold. They needed a corner. Second best corner on the board. He goes off at 24. I think 3 really good value picks at premium positions of need for the Eagles, Jaguars, and Lions back to back to back.
Yeah, I'm surprised Quinton Mitchell lasted this long. I'm sure Harry Roseman and the Eagles were doing backflips. There was talk throughout the week that they may trade up to Denver to secure their cornerback. They sat there. I mean, we saw him at the Senior Bowl. He was terrific at the Combine. He's an outstanding press corner. And, it's a great selection by the Eagles who didn't have to move. Brian Thomas, I guess I'm slightly surprised that the Jaguars didn't take Terry and Arnold over Brian Thomas, and only because I thought that they needed cornerbacks more. But Thomas was much higher rated on my board than Terry and Arnold. I think he's got tremendous upside. I think if you develop him, he may not be as elite as Malik Neighbors or Romaduzze, but he's going to be right there with those guys. He's just hitting his stride, and you added another weapon for Trevor Lawrence, so you can't go wrong with that. And then the Lions make the move up to get the cornerback when they see Terry and Arnold starting to fall. And he gets past the Eagles. He gets past Jacksonville. The Steelers don't take a cornerback. So the Lions go up and they make their move and they get it. They get a real good player. Listen, last time they took a defensive back out of Alabama, Brian Branch, right? And he's done a great job there. I think Terry and Arnold was a terrific selection for them.
Draft season is brought to you by Moody's. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Visit Moody's.com to learn more. All right, Tony, and then we get 3 picks, no trades here, of need. Packers needed a tackle. Jordan Morgan. He's been a left tackle for 3 years in college. We'll see if they move him inside the guard. Graham Barton to the Bucs. They need interior offensive line. Yeah. Graham Barton on the board. Good pick. And then Darius Robinson. The Cardinals desperately need pass rush, and he was the next defensive end on most people's boards.
I reached out to see if the Packers had drafted Jordan Morgan as a left tackle, as a right tackle, as a guard. I was told they don't know yet. But the fact is, he's a quality offensive lineman. Like you said, you could start him at guard, then develop him to, I believe, a left tackle.
And Tony, I'm sorry for interrupting. We've talked about this. The Packers like these versatile offensive linemen that you can move to different spots, so he's going to fit right in.
And, I don't know if they like Rasheed Walker, their left tackle. No, I like the kid out of when he came out of Penn State, but still, he's a quality guy that you could develop. Barton was a sensational pick for Tampa. I'm sure that they were surprised that he was there. You got to question Dallas. Did they trade down out of position to draft Graham Barton when they really needed a center? We'll talk about Graham Barton versus Tyler Guyton. And Darius Robinson, he's a terrific fit for the Arizona system. He's an outstanding player. He's got a high upside. He's a high quality character person who I think is going to do incredibly well, not only on the field, but in the locker room. He's going to be a major asset.
Yeah, no question about it. Then we have some action. The Chiefs move up to 28, Tony, and they pick Xavier Worthy, who's kind of a Marquise Hollywood Brown clone. They're very similar, speed, size. So they get 2 super fast guys. Chiefs at 28. They swap picks with the Buffalo Bills there. The Dallas Cowboys, you mentioned, they move down. They lose out on Graham Barton. They still get a tackle on Tyler Guyton. Now, they needed somebody to play the left side. Guyton has played on the right side, so that's something they're going to have to figure out. But certainly he's a good enough athlete to play left tackle. He just hasn't played left tackle before. So they're going to have to figure that out. And then Nate Wiggins to the Ravens at 30. They need corners. He's not really the physical tackler that they usually like in Baltimore, but the dude can run and he can cover.
First of all, Buffalo trades out of the opportunity to select Xavier Worthy, and then the Chiefs move up and take Xavier Worthy. Good for the Chiefs. You got to wonder what Buffalo, with the receivers that they lost, what they were thinking. Because Xavier Worthy would have been, I believe, a perfect fit for Josh Allen. Tyler Guyton, in my opinion, was a very questionable selection. He did play left tackle at Oklahoma for a little while. He lost his job. He has incredible upside.
That was 3 years ago, right, when he was a sophomore, I think, right?
He just doesn't consistently play to his level of ability. And we saw him at the Senior Bowl, and he was terrific. But when you watch the game film from Oklahoma, I didn't see the same player that I saw at the Senior Bowl.
You know what reminds me of, Tony? It actually reminds me of them picking Tyler Smith a couple years ago, where the tape, there was a lot of stuff in there that you worried about, but you saw the ability.
Yeah, the only thing is with Tyler Smith, I think Tyler Smith was drafted where he should have been. I think with Tyler Guyton, if Tyler Guyton played to his level of ability on an every snap basis at Oklahoma, Tyler Guyton's a top 12 pick. I mean, he's one of the first 2 or 3 offensive tackles selected off the board. He just never played up to the level or the expectations of scouts. Nate Wiggins, again, I thought they would have gone with the Cooper DeJean type, the bigger, stronger guy. I was not sold on Cooper DeJean being a first-round pick. Wiggins has got great speed. He's got nice length. A lot of things in his game that you got to figure out. I mean, I didn't think Wiggins or Cooper DeJean were guaranteed first-round picks. They go with the speed in Nate Wiggins.
Final 2 picks, Tony. 49ers, they did not trade Brandon Ayuk as of this recording, but they do draft a wide receiver in the first round, which is interesting. And it's Ricky Pearsall, the wide receiver out of Florida. He was my wide receiver 6, right at the top of that second round. I think he's a really good player. And then the Panthers move up 1 spot with the Bills. Very small price. I think they swapped either a 5th for a 6th or a 6th for a 7th, something like that. And they end up taking Xavier Legette, which for me is a little rich. I'm not as high in Legette as other people are, but he is a good fit with Deontay Johnson, 2 very different types. Legette's more of your run after catch, power, speed over the top guy, and Deontay Johnson's more of your route runner.
I agree with you. I think where Xavier Legette went was a reach, but I knew the Panthers liked him. In fact, in my 2-round mock draft, I had the Panthers selecting Xavier Legette with the 33rd pick of the draft. They move up 1 spot. They take him with the 32nd pick of the draft. He's big. He's fast. He's got to polish his game. I am surprised that the Niners took Ricky Pearsall, though I'm not surprised in the sense that I had said on the show, and I had been posting all along, he was the fastest rising receiver in the lead up to the draft. He was moving up draft boards faster than any other pass catcher. You watched him at Florida. He was a good route runner. He had dependable hands. He caught the ball. He catches the ball extremely well. Then he went to the combine and he tested off the charts. He ran much faster than anybody expected, and he looked much more athletic than anyone expected. And the end result is he hops into the first round.
All right, so Tony, real quick, we've kind of touched on all the picks here, a lot of offensive players. All in all, we had, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 offensive linemen by my count in round number 1. Jordan Morgan, Tyler Guyton, Fautanu, Fuanga, Mims, Latham, Fashanu, Alt, and Barton. So those are your offensive linemen. That's 9. You had 6 receivers go in the first round. Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, Brian Thomas, Pearsall, Legette. Oh, Worthy. Sorry, that's 7. So 7 wide receivers. So that's half the first round, Tony, were offensive linemen and wide receivers. 16 to 32 picks. Throw in the 6 quarterbacks. Right. You have 22 of 32 players in the first round were quarterbacks, wide receivers, or offensive linemen. So certainly a trend here. Overall, defensive players in that first round, Tony, I'm doing quick math here. I'm counting just 9. So a very much dominated first round with positions that we thought would go pretty heavy: wide receiver, offensive tackle, quarterback.
And of those 9 defensive players, you had 4 pass rushers, and you had 3 cornerbacks, right? So
5. You had Murphy, Turner, Latu, Verse, Chop, and Darius Robinson. So that's 6. Right. If you want to count all those guys as pass rushers, 6 pass rushers, 3 corners.
I'd consider Darius Robinson more of I don't consider him an edge rusher, but still. Right. I mean, the fact is we had only one true defensive tackle, Byron Murphy, which we thought. I don't know that it's a trend. I think it's just the way things worked out. I mean, in the past couple of years, we've had defensive-heavy drafts, especially at the top. But with 6 quarterbacks going in the top 15, I think that changed a lot of things, especially from the defensive perspective, and pushed a lot of those defensive players down. And then J.C. Latham, I never expected him to be a top 10 pick.
Yeah, look, I think we agree. Real quick, Tony, day 2. I'll list some of the players that are on the top of my board. You can give some of yours then as well. The two corners, Cooper DeJean and Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Yep.
They are the two of the three highest ranking players. The other one is Jackson Powers Johnson. I know there's some medical stuff with him, but I think the film was good enough to be considered in this area. Jerzon Newton is another guy that I have high. That's still there. A.D. Mitchell.
Yep.
Now there's off the field stuff with him, or not, maybe not off the field, but intangible stuff with him that maybe there's questions about. That again, hard for us to answer that. We don't meet with these kids and have the background on them. I'm probably hiring him the most. I like Kingsley Suamataia from BYU. He's still pretty up there. And then you got Troy Franklin, Ladd McConkey, Sansra still, Zach Frazier. Then you get a bit of a drop off. But those are the guys for me that I have kind of high on my board that are left for day two.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Kool-Aid McKinstry is the highest player still available on my board. And then it would be A.D. Mitchell. And I think Buffalo's probably going to swipe A.D. Mitchell off the board with that first pick in round two. I'd be surprised if they don't go receiver, Jerzon Newton, but we had an idea who he was going to fall in the second round, Jackson Powers Johnson. I said last show, and I wrote about it, that even though I had a first-round grad on him, there were some people who thought that he was being overrated and he would not be a first-round pick. Cooper DeJean, we talked about, Troy Franklin, and that's it. Yeah, Kingsley Suamataia, I think with Suamataia, I thought that Kansas City would take him at 32 if they didn't make a move. Suamataia is incredibly talented. There are some questions. There are some questions about his maturity. He's got to grow up, but he's a terrific tackle who was successful on the right side of BYU, successful on the left side. And then we saw him at the Senior Bowl, and he had a couple really good days of practice. And that's, really it. I mean, when you look at it, I don't think there were there were surprises, but there were no major reaches. I mean, the only major reach, in my opinion, probably was Bo Nix, but we all knew because of Denver, I was somehow going to land in the first round. I didn't think that there was anything overly crazy this evening.
No, I agree. And just to give you an idea of my top 32 players, only 6 weren't taken. So that's 26 out of 32. I think that's a pretty good number, which to your point, besides those 2 quarterbacks, and for me, Leggett, I think was very early for me personally. I know a lot of other people liked him more than I did. There weren't that many outliers. I think, of all the players picked, Tony, besides Leggett, Penix was the lowest guy on my board, and he was 38 for 32 picks. So I'm with you. I don't think teams did anything too crazy here.
Yeah, I'm looking at mine. Of my top 32, only 3, McKinstry, Mitchell, 4. McKinstry, Mitchell, Jerzon Newton, Jackson Powers Johnson were the only ones who did not end up in the first round. And I'm a little surprised by McKinstry. I was led to believe that Jones fracture wouldn't be a problem. I got to think that raised some red flags for him to fall out of the first round.
Tony, final thoughts before we say goodbye?
I still some good players left in the first round. I mean, this is going to be a historic draft because of the amount of quarterbacks that went in the top 15, because there's so many offensive players coming off the board one after another. You know who's going to be really happy right now is Spencer Rattler, because he's going to be the next quarterback off the board, and he's probably going to be drafted a lot earlier than most people, than probably he even thought.
Yeah, he might sneak into the second round now at this rate.
Possibility.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Tony. It'll be fun. Tony and I, you'll hear us again on draft season. When this draft is over, we'll record at some point on Saturday. It'll go up probably by Saturday night at some point, and we'll do a full draft review. And again, then we'll be back the following week with Tony's players to watch for 2025. We're always working, baby. So great job. Thank you for joining us on draft season, everybody. It was all brought to you by Moody's. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Visit Moody's.com to learn more. For Tony Pauline, I'm John Schmeelk. We'll see you next time on draft season. Get some sleep, and we do it all again tomorrow.